Hi, welcome to our webinar, How, What, Why, I'm an Energy Lawyer, Overview of Energy Law Practice across different practice areas. I'm Ryan from Pizzulli, Program Manager for the Institute for Energy Law, which is an institute of the Center for American and International Law. Today's program is hosted by the Programs Subcommittee of IEL's Young Energy Professionals Practice Committee. This webinar is the first part of a three-part series of webinars designed for summer associates and law students. And today, our moderator is Tyler Boyce. Tyler is a fourth-year litigator in Winston and Strawn's Houston office, focusing mostly on IP litigation, complex commercial litigation, and IP advising. Although he represents and advises clients in a variety of industries, most of his work is in the energy and petrochemical space due to his background in chemical engineering. I'll now turn it over to Tyler to introduce the panelists.
Thanks, Ryan. And we'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of their Friday morning to be here virtually. And to begin, I guess it'd be best if we could just go down the list. Megan, can you tell us a little bit about where you're from, where you went to school, and what you do?
Yeah, certainly. So my name is Megan Young. I'm a sixth-year associate at Baker Botts in the Houston office. I grew up in the Houston area in the suburbs. I went to undergrad and law school at the University of Oklahoma. I'm a very proud Sooner. And so when I was in law school, I, was really interested in the oil and gas and energy law classes that were offered. And so when it came time to decide what I wanted to do after law school, it kind of made sense to come back to Houston. And lo and behold, there's plenty of energy adjacent, oil and gas attorney positions here. So I landed at Baker Botts. That's where I've been my entire career. And my practice focuses on a variety of energy transactional work, with a particular focus on upstream and midstream, A&D, acquisitions and divestitures, and then also various energy project development, mostly focused in the LNG space.
Thank you. Hayden, can you tell us a little bit about where you're from and where you went to school and what you do now?
Hey everyone, I'm Hayden. I am an associate at Susman Godfrey. I, like every self-respecting Louisianian, I went to LSU for undergrad and went to Tulane for law school. That the first sentence I said doesn't apply to Tulane. So, to Tyler and John. Megan used the word oil and gas adjacent, so I'll run with that because I think that's a good. There's tons of oil and gas adjacent work in Houston, and that's kind of where I find myself. Megan just said a lot of things that I don't know, A&D, ETP, et cetera. I do primarily litigation. We don't do any transactional work at my firm. And so my experience with oil and gas has been litigation. And I had no idea I was interested in it, had no intention to do it, came to a litigation firm, had oil and gas work, and realized it's a really, really interesting industry.
Thanks, Hayden. And John, can you tell us about yourself?
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm the actual true Louisianian going to LSU twice like you're supposed to. But yeah, same story. I went to LSU for undergrad and law school, then hightailed it to Houston because the opportunity was there. I didn't have really any background or desire necessarily to be in the energy space specifically. It's kind of just where I found myself. And I do transactional work in like the highest level sense. So I do a lot of M&A on the like equity deal side, and I do a lot of capital markets work. And so it sounds like Megan probably gets a little more granular with the asset stuff. I'm dealing more with just buying and selling the entities themselves. So I also don't get super nitty gritty with the energy specific terminology. So I think Megan's gonna have to lead the way on that one. But yeah, and also I'm an associate at the V&E in Houston.
And now, because we're here with summer associates, can each of you tell us what you did your 1L summer and 2L summer, and I guess the different steps that led to your job now? We'll start with Hayden.
Yeah, so I spent my first summer, I was at Tulane. I had no intention to come to Houston whatsoever. My wife and I were both from Louisiana and decided we were going to stay in Louisiana. So I summered at a firm in New Orleans, a small firm. And then my second year, V&E had a strong 2-lane background. So V&E came and interviewed on campus. A good friend of mine recommended that I do it, even though I had no interest in it. Interviewed with V&E, really liked everyone there, had a great time, and went there for summer. Of course, it's a little weird because that was the COVID summer. But John Frey was actually one of my summer associate classmates. And I really liked V&E, and actually didn't really do any oil and gas related work there. Just did. I had the good realization that all the things that John and Megan were talking about transactional work was not something I was interested in. And so V&E, I split between litigation and M&A and realized I want to do litigation.
And then did you go straight to Susman after law school, or any clerking in between?
Yeah, so yeah, I guess I should have finished the prompt, Tyler. Good, thanks for that. I clerked for 2 years on the federal district court in Louisiana and New Orleans, and I clerked on the Fifth Circuit. And I actually was planning to go to V&E, really like everyone there, and then had an opportunity to interview with Susman and hit it off, and a really intense and really great litigation group that does all kinds of stuff. Lo and behold, oil and gas stuff too, which I, again, up to that point, up to 2 years ago, had no idea I wanted to do.
And John, what did you do in your 2 summers, and how did you end up where you are now?
Yeah, it sounds like Hayden and I got kind of an inverse here. So the opportunities out of LSU as a 1L are pretty tough. I do think our experience on this panel, not that we're all like dinosaurs, but it's a little bit different than what you guys are listening to this probably. But 1L jobs weren't really that common, whether in big law or around local law firms. So I clerked at 2 different firms in New Orleans. Both of them only did litigation, and knew immediately I had zero interest in it. But I was also one of the people that went to law school not knowing that they wanted to be a lawyer. I was always going to do something in like finance or investment banking or whatever. And law school kind of presented itself there with an opportunity. I got to go without breaking the bank. So figured I'd play a student for a couple more years before starting the career. And then my 2L summer was when I got to clerk with V&E. Like Hayden was saying, we'd clerked together on the COVID year, which was really bizarre. But I did get a little glimpse at the work that they do and thought it was pretty cool. Super, like I said, I'm very high level transactional focused, and so not that I do what an investment banker does, but I like to think I'm as little of a lawyer as you could possibly be being a lawyer, and that's the space that I wanted to find myself in. So it worked out that way. But yeah, I went straight through and clerked for V&E and started working at V&E. It was in 2021, so it's been about 4 years now.
Yeah, and I had a more similar experience to Hayden. I spent 1 summer split between transactions and IP, and I realized very quickly that energy M&A was not what I wanted to do, and transactional stuff was not where I needed to be. Well, Megan, can you tell us what you did during your summers, and how you ended up where you are?
Yeah, and I was candidly kind of all over the place. I didn't follow a very typical path, so I sort of had no idea what I wanted to do coming out of law school. My first summer, I actually worked at the Norman City Attorney's Office, and I was sort of doing some litigation, some amateur prosecuting traffic tickets, some city contracts, and had a really great time there, but sort of decided that wasn't for me. And after 1L, thought I was going to be a litigator. So my second summer, I worked at a small firm in OKC doing like complex litigation, like securities suits, that sort of stuff. By the end of that summer, decided I didn't like that. I had an amazing oil and gas law professor. Her name is Monica Ehrman. She does a lot of IEL talks. And so I sat down in her office and I was like, I don't want to be a litigator. I want to be in Houston. I've really enjoyed oil and gas. And so she was kind enough to put me in touch with her firm contacts in Houston. And so interviewed at a few oil and gas shops in Houston and landed at Baker Botts. So I was a 3L hire, which is a unique situation, but I started with the 2019 class.
So making friends with your professor paid off.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you mentioned that you took some oil and gas classes at at OU in law school. When you went into law school, did you know that energy law was something you were interested in? Is that something you had experience with before, or was it just you took a class and it seemed interesting and that's how you ended up here?
Yeah, a little bit of both, honestly. I had done my like last year of college, I had done an internship with an energy lobbyist. And so like had sort of, what you can call a briefing a case, right, as an undergrad student. And so I was slightly interested in energy, but honestly, I think I mostly took oil and gas because I was going back to Texas and it was sort of just previewed to us that we should take, energy classes because a lot of the work is going to be energy adjacent.
And so, y'all's day to day now, how much of your time is spent on, and in this, we can kind of bifurcate energy related matters or work for energy clients that may or may not be directly energy related for that deal or that transaction. So, John, can you tell us about your day to day and I guess what percentage in the last year or so has been energy related?
Yeah, I mean, most of it. I don't know how familiar everyone on the call is with V&E and the Houston market, but probably won't shock you that a lot of our client base is energy focused. Um, I that we do have groups that only do energy work. I'm not in them, but most of my clients would be obviously under the energy umbrella, 80% at least, probably more. Um, my day to day, like I said, is a little less focused on the energy piece. It's just kind of a matter of fact that I'm doing the work for the energy client, which is something that I think is pretty interesting, especially in a place like Houston where energy is such a big focus that like you can really be doing a lot of work in the energy sector and not have any idea that you're actually doing it. Or excuse me, not doing like energy law in quotes. Because it can kind of at a high level be very similar. Like I've done M&A deals for clients that have nothing to do with energy, and 90% of it was the exact same process. The 10% is where you make the money and why we get paid what we do because you have to have the expertise. But the 90%, the true like what I did from noon to 5 p.m. yesterday is can be kind of similar across the board.
And and Megan, what about your client base and your matters? How much of it is energy related?
It's 100%. So yeah, at our firm, we sort of separate out. We have like a general corporate practice group that sounds more of like what John would be doing. And so I would say a lot of their work is energy, but they also do non-energy matters. But I'm in an energy projects and transactions group. So unless it's a one-off pro bono thing, 100% of what I'm doing is for a client that is energy related. For me, typically oil and gas or LNG.
And Hayden, how about yourself?
Well, no transactions, but on a day to day, so I'm in a litigation shop, and I would say 20% of my day to day is oil and gas adjacent in terms of lawsuits and litigation and disputes between oil companies or you know pipeline companies, a wide variety of various different companies. And, our firm generally does a fair amount of oil and gas, especially if some transaction falls through or there's some dispute based on merger or something like that. But I would say about 20% of my day to day is oil and gas.
So if it wouldn't be John or Megan, but if one of their counterparts messes up, then you kind
Right,
of
right.
clean up the
They
mess.
would never be them. That's right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, there's a really healthy litigation boutique system in Houston, as I think most people on this call know, and there's a wide variety of cases. And yes, some of those cases very much are a transaction falls through, or somebody breaches their part of the deal, or somebody intentionally breaches because there's some change in the economics of it. There's a lot of that going on in Houston.
And we don't need to go through an exhaustive list, but are there any kind of really interesting or cool or uh, high profile cases or deals that any of y'all have worked on that uh, you'd like to to talk about? Megan, we'll start with you.
You're putting me on the spot. Yeah, I often I get this question when we do like law student events. And so and my practice is kind of split right now, right? So on the, I use the acquisitions and divestiture side of it. And so that's really, to simplify it, buying and selling assets. And so a lot of those transactions are sort of formulaic. So like I won't bog you down, right, with the mechanics of a purchase and sale agreement. The other half of my practice is, infrastructure or project development. And, I wouldn't necessarily say it's more interesting than the M&A side of things, but we do get to take more innovative approaches on those transactions, right? So, currently I'm working on an international like LNG liquefaction facility. And so those always pose just a variety of, problem solving issues from, you have to wrap your head around gas supply, you have to wrap your head around the equity arrangements for the facility and the project development agreements, and then you've got to handle offtake of the the product, the commodity that you're selling. And so high profile maybe not so much, but I do find those infrastructure development projects to keep you on your toes at least.
Well, to people in South Louisiana, I think the LNG projects are pretty high profile. I've been by the Cameron LNG down there south of Lake Charles, and it's quite an impressive site to see. Well, so you said that you're a sixth year now, and all of your work's energy related. Was it always that way, or as a junior, did you do any other sorts of transactional work?
I didn't. I sort of came in with like an oil and gas hat on and just dove into that work. There's, always like been a big pot of it in my group. And so there's just never been a reason to sort of dip into other work. And part of that is, like I said, the way my firm is structured. There are definitely transactional groups here where people do both types of work. But I've just kind of slotted into that, A&D infrastructure hat and just been busy with that since.
I wanted to do that and dive straight into oil and gas stuff, but I've been fortunate enough to be forced to branch out, and I've enjoyed it a bit. But my favorite cases are my oil and gas related. Well, John, any cool projects you've gotten to work on, or anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, frankly, I think the most interesting stuff that I do is public M&A. There's obviously not nearly as much public M&A as there is private M&A because there's not as many public companies. But those are the ones that you get to see like in the newspaper, Wall Street Journal stuff, the multi-billion-dollar deals. I don't think any of them individually are that interesting, or at least, excuse me, the ones that I've worked on, they're all pretty typical. Those have all been oil and gas kind of consolidation. But it's cool and rewarding to watch that show up in the media, because there's not really a lot of reasons for like your friends who don't do this sort of work to really care about what you're doing. But you and I were talking about this beforehand. One of the deals that I did that the content of the deal was probably the most interesting that I've started on is their Lithium Americas Corp is developing a lithium mine in Nevada, and there's obviously not a ton of lithium mines around, especially not in America. And we had to go through this whole process of securing a loan from the DOE. And the deal that I helped on wasn't actually the DOE financing, but with kind of their make whole financing to fund the rest of the project, because the DOE didn't fund the whole thing. It was up to a certain percentage. And that was like really weird. And frankly, like the deal got super gross, not because like the counterparty was difficult or anything, but the terms of the financing got absolutely outrageous. The DOE loans that they give out, I don't know if anyone listening to this has ever dug into them, but they're wild. It's like obviously the agreements we work on are long. They're not like 10 pages, but they're not 1,000 typically. They're probably all around 100, whatever. The DOE loan was like 500, and each line fed into another line, and it was all important. You had to know everything about it, and the restrictive covenants on it were absolutely outrageous. So I probably this was probably the deal I've worked on the most. That was like over hundreds of millions of dollars in total financing, where the leverage of what they paid advisors was the highest by far. Like this was hundreds and hundreds of hours from me personally. Same with 100 other attorneys, all billing 100 hours to the same deal. So it was cool to see that happen. And that one, obviously, there's a massive hole in the ground we'll get to go look at, and they'll dig some lithium out of it. I think it's pretty cool.
Right. So while we're trying to get away from reliance on China, we need you and your colleagues to
Maybe
do
not.
the hard work of parsing through the DOE line. So how is that the only time you've dealt with the Department of Energy, or is uh, that's interesting. I didn't think a government agency would make anything harder. But I
Yeah,
guess
right. No, it's all efficient and streamlined.
well, Hayden, any cool cases that you've been on, since you and I don't do transactions or deals, but any interesting matters?
I'll say my firm does some really interesting oil and gas industry litigation. I will say personally, I have not done big, sexy oil and gas litigation cases, but I think that's a good thing. And I'm going to make a pitch here to the small, presumably smaller number of summer associates on this call that are angling towards a litigation practice in energy. One of the really cool things about oil and gas litigation is it's intensive. There's a lot of fact witnesses. There's a lot of technical, experts, and a lot of complicated moving parts. And so it's a great opportunity for young associates to get their hands dirty and get in these cases and have really meaningful roles and argue motions, write motions, take depositions. And so, I've handled several cases, nothing massive, but I think that's a good thing because there's a lot of opportunity. There's so much oil and gas litigation going on in Houston that some of the smaller dollar figure cases give you a ton of opportunity to, get your hands dirty and, get some experience. So nothing too sexy, Tyler, but I think that's a good thing.
Well, I'll echo, what you just said is, yeah, a lot of times as a junior, the best chances to get experience are on a pro bono matter or a smaller matter where you're the one that they want spending the time there, maybe not a partner or senior associate. And also I'll echo what you said about oil and gas deals. There's always a ton of or issues. There's always a ton of fact witnesses, and you're speaking with the operators and the engineers and trying to understand one, how all this stuff works, and presumably, what went wrong or what maybe didn't go wrong from our side. And it's you kind of got to immerse yourself and really understand the technology to understand the case. And I find that cool and interesting. But have I'll stay with you, Hayden. Have you done any cool, I don't want to call it a field trip, but a site visit or a kind of putting on boots and getting out in the field to go examine anything?
Yeah, so you can't see it on the camera right now, but I'm actually a little sunburned because I was actually on a site visit yesterday. We represent a pipeline company in several disputes about pipeline and adjacent properties. And so we are in the field a lot with experts and operators and looking at the properties. And, there's plenty of that fun stuff going on in oil and gas litigation. And I'm in Louisiana way too much, frankly, because we have lots of work there and lots of things to do for the client. And so, yes, there are cool opportunities, one of which was literally yesterday, where apparently I was with Tyler's mentor all day. I didn't realize that, and then got delicious shrimp po' boys after. So all around great time, highly recommend site visits.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to go to a couple well sites. I've seen more of beautiful Odessa, Texas than I ever thought I would have. It is cool when you fly in, you see the oil rig, the oil wells as far as you can see. But Megan, have you had any cool any trips anywhere for I guess cool is up to the eye of the beholder, but have you made any trips for any of the deals you've worked on?
Yeah, and my experience with this is more from a like educational or business development kind of perspective, right? So it sounds like Hayden was actually like looking at what was going on. But we have a partner here who really thinks, understanding the full oil and gas value chain is really beneficial to, being an adequate drafter of transactional agreements. And so we've been down to, the Eagle Ford outside of Laredo a few times to visit clients' drill sites and get to see like an active frac operation. And like I said, I don't know that the average person would say that that's fun, but I think it is really informative for our practice. And it really kind of brings the contracts to life, especially like the granular asset level stuff. You hear all these terms flying back and forth, but you don't really understand what that means. And so those are always a fun time. I know the firm's taken other people to Midland as well, but I haven't made it out west to a drill site yet. So.
I've actually been to a well site with Baker Botts attorneys in a litigation. It's cool to get there and see that equipment. It's impressive. For those who are uninitiated, what's the Eagle Ford?
The Eagle Ford's a basin in South Texas. Yeah. So I guess stretches south into the east, but just a basin that producers drill in. Sorry to throw too much lingo out. And
no, the lingo is the cool part about this job. That's how you know somebody's in energy law when they speak like a petroleum engineer. Now I want to pivot a bit here, and since we've got a number of summer associates, Megan, maybe this isn't as applicable to your time at your summers, but what's one thing you wish you would have known going into your 2L summer? The last one before you're going to start your job. John, we can start with you. What's one thing you wish you would have known?
Yeah, so I think I do have some good advice on this one, but it's dependent on the target. I'm not really sure what the makeup of the summer associate class watching this is, but if you're going to a school that doesn't really have the feeders into big law specifically, I wish I would have just known like what it was. But no one really tells us. And from Louisiana, there are no big law firms there. And so I think that the difference between what you would be doing at a day-to-day at a mid-sized firm versus a big law firm or a local firm is like pretty substantially different. And the resources are out there, but it's one of those things that you may need to go kind of find out on your own. Hopefully something like this can help you a bit too. It seems like across the board here, we're obviously all a little more in the big law sphere, but not everyone's going to go into big law, and a lot of people's opportunities, especially the more attainable opportunities, will be more local firms or mid-sized firms. And I can tell you right now, I know for a fact, I did not know for a fact, but I know for a fact that I do not do anything that my peers do in Louisiana that are still there. Not going to speak for Hayden, but I feel like that's probably true of anyone that he knows that he grew up with that went to law school that's around our age. Not to say that it's better or worse, it's just completely different. Like their day to day, even if they're doing transactional work, is crazy how different it is than mine. And I think that difference is something that would be really helpful going into whether it's Houston, whether it's energy or whatever you're doing, going into the summer where you're supposed to be making your decision, because it's that 2L summer is kind of where you get your job. Like your Megan was a 3L hire, but to her point, and in my experience too, that's obviously like less common. The 2L summer is typically when you're forming your career path. And so it's good to have that base beforehand, because I didn't have it. Thankfully, it worked out for me. But something I recommend you guys kind of try to talk to your friends about, or people that are 3Ls right now that are going to those different types of firms.
Hayden, anything that you wish you would have known going into your 2L summer?
There's a lot of things I wish I would have known. I echo everything John said, because it's kind of a particular hurdle coming from Louisiana, getting into a market. So I'll give advice that I think applies to every summer associate on this call. Something I wish I had appreciated more was when you're summering, and even when you're not summering, when you're in law school and you're going to events, try to make connections to people, especially partners and people that are in practices that you're interested in. Because I have found that this is the profession is very cordial and very sort of mentor-mentee focused, or natural for that. And, when you're summering at a firm, for me, I didn't summer at the same firm twice. And so, I went to different firms, I tried different places, but I find that the people that I made connections with while summering are people I can still pick up the phone and call today and ask for real advice, really important advice about life and about practicing law and about what to do. There are plenty of people that were in the exact situation you're in right now that are 15 years ahead of you. And, they know a lot more than you do. They just do. They know a lot more about the market. They know a lot more about firms. They know a lot more about practices. And so you should really focus on making those connections so that a year from now or 2 years from now, or even 10 years from now, you can shoot them an email and say, hey, I'm really trying to figure out what I want to do. I'm not quite sure what I want to do. Can we go to coffee, or can we get on a phone call? And you can ask that person, here's the things I'm interested in. Where would you go? You know everything about the market. What firm would you go to? What practice would you do? I know that's kind of generic advice, but I think it's really, really helpful and important.
Yeah, and thanks for that. To your point, I summered at a different firm. My 2L summer with Winston was during COVID, but my in-person summer the year before that at a different firm here in Houston, I made some connections and actually am planning on meeting up for a happy hour with one of the partners who was there, right? That we've stayed in touch. I didn't end up going back there, but it's good to make as many connections as you can in this industry. And what I've found more so than I ever would have thought was the case is how sort of eager and willing older attorneys are to give advice and help people, maybe avoid mistakes that they had made, or give them a lesson without having them have to learn it the hard way. And I've been fortunate enough to have some great mentors to help me out along the way. But Megan, what's one thing that you wish you would have known going into your 2L summer?
Yeah, and I think I'd kind of echo what Hayden said, but sort of tie it into the industry, industry specifically. It's such a small industry, right? So like make those connections, and even to the extent you're not, like you should maintain your connections, but also just like being kind to people, right? And like you're going to run into these same people down the road. I'm speaking from like the Houston big law community. It's not as big as you think. And then when you start boiling it down to like Houston energy litigation, or like Houston upstream A&D, it's the same sorts of people. So it's never too early to start sort of like cultivating those connections, as Hayden said, but then also just like being a good person on your career path.
And now being on the attorney side of things, one thing summers always want to know is how they can do their best job. So what's something that maybe a summer's done that really stood out to you, even though you didn't ask for it, or something that you wish more of the summer associates who work on your projects do? What's one tip that a summer can do that's really helpful when they're working on a project for you? And Megan, we'll go back to you. Do you have any
Yeah,
anything
I
there?
think, yeah, like for our practice, oftentimes it's just can be as simple as like keeping a deadline, first of all, is what I will say, right? Or asking for more, time if you need it. But also I think just asking questions early. I sort of say the same thing to junior associates, right? Like get the assignment, actually take a second to like review it and digest it, and then make time, right, to go sit down with your supervising attorney, whoever that is, and just ask thoughtful questions. Sort of going back to the 2L advice, wrapping that into like no one is going to be more eager to talk to you than like at this stage, right? Like this is when you have the most sort of leverage to ask questions, right? And people aren't going to question it. And so I encourage summers to take advantage of that. Like people are really going to be, for the most part, open to talking about their, practice. And I think to the extent you can wrap that in, on the projects you're working on, it's a good look for a summer.
Yeah, we don't expect anyone to have any expertise as a summer. It's an eagerness to figure out what's needed and how to maybe most efficiently or most effectively do it. John, do you have Anything that you would any advice you would give to a summer who's working on a project for you?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely a fine line you have to follow when you're going to take this advice, but uh, don't be afraid to be wrong. I think that's like something, and this is for your position as a summer associate, but also like bleeding into you being a junior associate. Like a lot of junior associates have the opportunity to make judgment calls, and they just hedge super hard, and they're like, no, like I'll just defer to you. Like, let me know like if you think about this differently or whatever, which is obviously fine. And like that is organically how it's going to work. But you're smart. All of you are smart. You all got here because you're smart. I know that you probably don't have the reps that you need, but even as a summer associate, we're not going to give you something, or hopefully, I say hopefully no one is going to be giving you a project that is like so complicated that you are incapable of making some sort of analysis come out of it. And we're giving you something that we think you can handle. And I find it, I don't want to say annoying. I find it like the only time I ever have like a negative perception of summer associates would be when they are just unwilling to go past the like, okay, yeah, fill in the dates on this form and then send it back to me. Like I want to know that they thought about it and then that they made a decision, and it can be as wrong of a decision as I've ever heard anyone make. It's still just like pumps me up to know that they tried and they thought about it, and then I can just tell them the way that I thought about it and move on from there. But I feel like that's a piece that a lot of people miss. They try to stay in the lines too much. But again, like I said, you got to take that with a grain of salt because you don't want to be like super arrogant and pretend that you know everything. But yeah, I think you have more of a leash to make judgment calls than you think. And I most of the time, at least people I work with would appreciate it when you get to see that thought process that you guys went through.
Yeah, when you're doing research or really diving into something and poring over documents, if you see something and have an idea of why maybe a different strategy call could be made than the one that's being made, oftentimes another attorney on the case who's worked on it longer has thought of that, but sometimes not. And I did get chastised as a junior sometimes for not um, offering what I thought was best and just deferring to the partners um, when I was the one who was closest to the facts and understood the issues the best and where I could have given some more insight. Then I kind of took things the other way, and um, after trial, the lead attorney was like, all of your ideas were helpful. Tyler, you had a lot of ideas and a lot of them were bad, but thank you for speaking up. And we ended up using some of them. So thank you. So it felt good. I wasn't afraid to speak my mind. And as long as you're not, like John said, arrogant about it, I think people are really receptive to your ideas, even if it's not what the team uses. It's good to have more ideas thrown in the mix. Now, um, Hayden, what's something that a summer can do that's helpful for you when they're working on a project?
Yeah, it's hard not to give a cheesy response to this one. And Megan and John, I mean, I echo everything they say. The thing that probably I like to see most is just taking an interest in the work. It's really it's nice to see that, and it pays dividends, I think, when people, when you're genuinely interested and people see that, it makes a difference. People notice that, they clock that, and it makes working with the summer associate more fun. And I just think enjoy the work, focus on the work and take an interest in it. And that'll lead to the things that John and Megan are talking about, and like Tyler's talking about, identifying stuff and feeling like you can speak up.
Thank you. And we we've got some time left. So is there any and I won't direct this to one of you specifically, but feel free to speak up, is there anything that you really do or don't, hopefully not don't, like about being an energy lawyer? Like what's surprised you about your job that in a good way that you'd like to impart to the summer, something you didn't know when you got into this field from the start, and I'll leave that open for any three of y'all to answer.
Yeah, I'll go first. Something, people have a lot of strong thoughts about the oil and gas industry, obviously. And it can be a polarizing industry on just you bump into someone on the street and they talk about the oil and gas industry. People can have really critical or really favorable opinions. I have just found that, there's a lot of great people in the industry, and it's, just regular people, and so that shouldn't surprise you. That shouldn't be a shock, but there's a certain perception of the industry, and I think it's it's been interesting to see that perception maybe doesn't align with what I've seen.
Yeah, and I can piggyback off of that, moving away from oil and gas, but still staying under the energy umbrella. Frankly, I personally am not that interested in the renewables work, but I think the renewables space in the energy transition is very fascinating. And we are the lawyers that are hedging that whole environment. And it's kind of interesting. You wouldn't necessarily think that like your biggest clients, being normally the biggest oil and gas players, would be the ones to also kind of, I don't want to say lead, but like take a massive role in the energy transition space, but they are. And so you get to see this real time. And I think it's fascinating seeing the types of deals that we're doing, where the capital is going, where it's coming from, and how it's getting there. So like I was saying before this, like I just did that deal with the DOE, not that the lithium mine was like part and parcel with the energy transition, but I would have never thought that I would have done that even on 2 years ago, doing oil and gas deals and doing renewables deals. You get to see these like weird angles that, I mean, like certainly you could research on your own if you wanted to, but it's so vast and it's so quickly moving. Like the types of, I don't do a ton of renewables deals, but the types that I do today compared to what I did 2 years ago are like completely unrelated. And there's a lot of commentary you could say about that, but I think it's really cool because you get to see that fast paced and it's happening real time. So it's not all just like going to find an oil rig someone shoved in the ground in West Texas, although that is a lot of what it is. But there's a ton around the edges that you wouldn't really get a lot of insight on if you weren't doing work in this space. And I think it's pretty interesting to see real time.
So I think everyone's, understands that oil and gas is part of energy, but you touched on renewables. What different types of renewable technology have you done deals for?
So, like that, we touched on this, and Megan got into the law firm structure too. We have a whole group that does like nothing other than energy transactions, and they do almost all of the renewable stuff. So, when I say renewables deals, I'm still talking about just buying and selling companies that operate in the renewable space, but I'm still above it all. So I don't get like that granular, but I mean, we've sold solar farms, wind farms. It's just cool to see the trends, because there'll be a summer where like we'll do 3 solar deals, and then there'll be a summer where we do 4 wind deals, offshore wind. Yeah, and I guess going back to lithium stuff, we've done some renewable batteries deals, which were interesting. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm not the best one to answer like the granular level response to that question. But it is still interesting. You get to see the trends of where things are going, and like I was saying, where the capital is going, because all these private equity firms are investing in something, and most of them have some sort of renewables arm right now. And you kind of see it's not even just year by year, but like quarter by quarter, capital will be hot in one space and won't be in another. Which again, a lot of commentary on that we don't need to get into, but I think it's cool to see real time.
It's funny to see how the winds of change blow, and maybe administrations or the priorities of the government or where the market's going, it will have an effect on that, obviously. And
Yeah, certainly.
it's interesting to follow and kind of see what's happening. Well, Megan, anything that surprised you about the space that you've learned about it and appreciate as you've gotten into it?
First of all, I liked your winds of change joke. I don't think it was an intentional pun, but with the renewable energy, we had a wind law class at my law school, which is like, I always tell people the funniest, class I took. But I would say just that it's more interesting than I expected. I think, I went to a school where we didn't have a lot of people taking big law jobs. And so like when I told people where I was going, what I was doing, people are like, they're going to lock you in a closet, right? And you're just going to be like filling in numbers on forms. But there is small parts of our jobs, right, that are formulaic, but a lot of like what my day is, right, is clients coming to us and us having to come up with like innovative, solutions by way of contracts, right? So there is stuff that we're pulling, stuff off the shelf for, but a lot of what we're doing in the infrastructure space or in the new energy renewable space is sort of, putting together contracts from scratch, which is just more like makes your day more fulfilling, right? Like you feel like you're actually creating work product, not just kind of like stamping the same purchase agreement for each transaction. And so I've been pleasantly surprised that it's an intellectually engaging career.
Yeah, and a lot of what we do in cases and deals is similar across them, just because there's a life cycle and there's boxes to check. But when a client comes to you with something and says, "Please solve this for me," and it's not anything with a straightforward answer, I think that's a really cool part of this job is the having to be a creative problem solver aspect of it and really really exercise that part of your brain. We've got a couple questions that have been submitted here. One of them is what are questions for summer associates to ask themselves to decide if they even want to practice in the energy law space? And I'll I guess start with Hayden.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard to give an answer from the litigation side of things because litigation is not generally you're not going directly into a specialized litigation role. You're going to end up in a general litigation role, and you're going to handle and try cases across industries. And so to those that are really interested in energy litigation, then target people that would have that target. Don't be afraid to pull up websites and say that person does something that sounds like I'm interested in, and email them, say, can you please hop on a call? If you're asking yourself if you want to practice in the energy space, it's not quite how it works in litigation. Like I said, you'll just kind of get cases, but be prepared for that kind of stuff to come on your desk, and be interested in it and try it out, and if you don't like it, then you don't have to do it anymore.
Right. And I'll kind of echo what you said. It's good to get especially in litigation a kind of a wide range of experience because that'll inform you how to better attack something in a different space. I do both patent litigation and regular complex commercial litigation, and sometimes you learn some unique strategies in one that can apply to the other. But I don't know if there's any question to ask yourself to avoid energy litigation entirely. But if there's any part of the energy transition or the energy industry that interests you, there is litigation, there are deals that concern it. Law touches so many aspects of what businesses do every day. And so there's always a niche to be carved out for somebody who's really interested in a certain subject matter. But John, is there any questions that you think a summer could ask themselves to decide if they want to do work in the energy space?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of two-layered. I keep going back to the fact that like I do truly kind of operate above the industry that my clients live in. And so what you really want to ask yourself is two things. One, um, are you willing to do something like that where you don't really need to be fully engulfed in the space that you operate? Because if the answer to that is no, it makes it a little bit harder here. And then you really do need to know if the energy space or whatever space you will enter into, any segment you're passionate about. You can certainly be a fantastic energy lawyer and not be passionate about energy law as a general matter. I wouldn't say you should hate it, but I like again, frankly, I think it's very cool. But I think my job is cool in a way. Like the deals that I do, I think are interesting. And I've said it before, I've done plenty of deals that weren't energy focused, and I had the same feeling when I did those, right? So if you can see yourself kind of filling out a role at a law firm that offers you the opportunity to do that, then that's fantastic. But then the second piece is, if you don't, I would recommend probably not trying to put yourself into a hole of a law firm that does nothing other than work in the energy space, because you might jam yourself a little bit. But that will be true. It's not really, again, I know you're whoever asked this, your question was probably like trying to get more specific about energy, but it's going to be a problem you're going to face in any sector that you want to go into. And the answer is probably going to be the same, where you want to make sure you have the optionality to do what you think is interesting and what you want to do. And again, like, I know everyone probably wants to go into a job loving it and like thinking it's going to be what they've been passionate about their whole lives. Like, that is fantastic if that's how it plays out for you. But I am telling you that it is not at all my path, and I am very satisfied with the career choice that I've made in the way that it's been fulfilling for me so far. So hopefully, again, that's still like super high level, but hopefully that is at least a little bit helpful.
Yeah, I knew I wanted to do energy stuff just because my dad's a petroleum engineer, and if I didn't go to law school, I was going to move to Midland and be a frac engineer. But I didn't know I wanted to do patent law, and I kind of fell into that one, and glad I did. So you never like be open to opportunities, and seek out opportunities. If you don't be afraid to raise your hand. That's one thing. If somebody doesn't ask you to do something, it's not always because they don't think you're qualified. It's just a lot of times we have other things in our mind. So if something interests you, or some case or some project or some deal uh, looks interesting, pester whoever's on it to get on there would be my advice, um, in any role that you can get, because you never know what that may lead to. Well, Megan, do you have any advice for questions that Summers can ask themselves if they even want to practice in the energy space?
Yeah, and I think it's sort of to what John said. It's probably just a question for any industry, right? Is like, if you're going to be more specialized, like, are you willing to kind of put in the extra educational hours, right, to sort of understand that industry? I find that, like, if you're doing upstream oil and gas, if you're doing LNG, I don't do a ton of this, but if you're doing like wind and solar power, and you're hired to be, a lawyer on those projects, like at the asset level, like clients sort of expect you to know the lingo, the terminology. You don't have to know it as well as an engineer, but you need to be able to sort of have those conversations. And so I think just knowing, are you willing to kind of learn that and, step into that role, or would you rather be more of a, what I'd call like a corporate generalist? And understand some, but not need to know every single little detail. And then that applies to the energy industry, obviously. Like, are you wanting to learn all those things? I think it's fascinating. But opinions may differ. So.
We've got another question that asks, is there an arbitration element in the energy sector? I know sometimes with renewable energy, foreign companies will invest using treaties or charters, including arbitration clauses. And I can answer that. And Hayden, if you have any insight, go ahead and chime in. But yes, there's a ton of arbitration in the energy industry, and there's lots. We're shipping LNG to Europe. We're and all over the world. I think we have pipelines that head into Mexico. I know people that I've worked with have done a ton of arbitration with an international aspect connected to Winter Storm. I think Uri was the one that came in 2021 and caused pipelines to freeze up, and you couldn't move things from one place to another. So yeah, there is a ton of arbitration used in the dispute resolution process. And there's even it's not all international. There's a lot of arbitration done domestically, that and that's just companies choosing to integrate that into a clause, into a contract, saying maybe we want to avoid district court litigation, the discovery that comes along with that. So I would say arbitration falls under the litigation aspect of energy, but it's definitely there. And I don't know if you had anything to add to that, Hayden.
No, I've not done any arbitration, but that's just because the nature of our work.
Yeah, I will say on the contract side, bigger deals, probably not nearly as common. But I think the question was more focused on what you were getting at, Tyler, where it's like you're talking about a lot of like foreign deals, where it is a little more common. But normally the bigger deals that we do, it wouldn't be that common for arbitration to be the means of dispute resolution. But it is certainly common in smaller deals. It's really just like a function of how familiar the parties are with one another and how they want to handle stuff, whether they expect to be arguing or not.
Well, thank y'all so much for your time today. Thank everyone for listening in. I think we're butting up against our hour, but I guess one last thing is if any of you three have any departing advice for the summers, then feel free to chime in, and then we can conclude today's session.
Yeah, I'll reiterate, make connections with people. The folks you're talking to that you're working with during your summer are going to be potentially lifelong mentors. You may not realize it. I mean, there's people at V&E. I summered at V&E and I didn't even go there. And there's people at V&E that I could call right now and ask important questions about your life, about, I'm thinking about moving firms, or I'm thinking about starting at this firm. What do you think about that? And it's really, really, I can't stress enough, so helpful to have those connections. And then the other thing would be, don't feel afraid to reach out to people. If you are interested in some firm or you're interested in some practice, then email them, and if you have a connection, you went to the same law school, whatever it is, do that. But if you don't, just say, what you're doing looks very interesting. I think I'm interested in it. Can we hop on a call? That's my closing thoughts. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there.
Yeah, I can echo that too. And I'll drive it even more home on the social aspect. You guys probably hear it all the time, but like it's, I think, easily the most important part of the summer associate experience you're going to get. The work that you're going to get exposed to is obviously very important, but the people that you're going to work with, I think, frankly, matter more. Some people have a differing view, but finding the right spot is is a more of a personality thing for a lot of people, and it certainly was for me. And to Hayden's point, you make friends. I haven't talked to Hayden in like 2 years, but I still think we're boys. So we connected right before this call, and it was like we have been talking the whole time, and we don't work together, but it's been multiple years. And like I said, if I needed something, I know that I could call him. And it's that sort of thing that does stay for a super long time. And you only get that from the social part. It's not nearly as much of like, if you do good work for me, yeah, I'm going to remember that. But also if we were cordial and I viewed you as a friend, like that's a connection that you'll probably have the rest of your life if you need it.
Yeah, I think they summed it up great, but you take advantage of those connections. And like I said earlier, being a summer who people are willing to pour sort of advice into.